Hey Gina, thanks for
Hi.
talking to me.
Yeah, good to see you, Bob. I hear you're looking for funding for your next game.
Yeah. I'm looking for funding for this new game that I'm going to be working on.
Well, all right then. Let's hear your pitch.
Okay. So picture this, right? It's going to be this shooting game in which you're a space pirate. I already emailed you that, but wait. I got to start at the beginning because otherwise it's not going to make any sense. So we're in 3048. It's this planet called Guzzleflubber, and Guzzleflubber is a planet in the system. And wait. I should probably explain it. So the name of the system is actually the sound of the hands clapping like this. Does that make any sense to you?
Sure.
Okay, cool. So the thing with the is that Guzzleflubber is a really young system in the known universe. So the inhabitants of Guzzleflubber, they're actually called the Ancient Ones, and they actually really.
Approximately
15 minutes.
later.
Then Postulon the Magnificent gave birth to the Rock of
Okay,
Ursula, and
Bob,
then Tyroid.
Bob, Bob, Bob.
Yeah,
Can I stop you for a second, please?
I mean that's a bit rude, but okay.
Well, we're going a little bit over time here, and I just had some questions for you.
Oh, is it because of the name? Is it because of the name? Because we can change the name. I guess Postulon is a bit unwieldy for a space pirate, but you know he could be like a space courier as well
No,
if that's something
no,
that you
it's
guys.
it's not really that. I was just wondering what the gameplay would be like. Do you have a prototype?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me pull it up for you here. It's a little bit rough around the edges, but you know, it's a prototype, right? So in this, you can see the inventory system and how all
Oh,
the.
so it's a space trading simulation game?
No. Haven't you been paying any attention? It's a shooter. Like the inventory, I guess it's not that important, but it's what we've already started working on. I mean, we should have a prototype of the shooting mechanics ready in about, I don't know, half a year or so. Um,
Half a year? Well, what are the costs for that? Do you have a business plan?
Uh, sort of. I have to hire some people first, right? And then we can
I'm
continue.
sorry, you have to hire people?
It's just me right now, and this is a AAA console game. I mean, you're not expecting me to do all this by myself, right? I mean,
Bob, we're a mobile game publisher. We don't do console.
oh, really? Okay. Well, I mean, are you sure you don't want to get in on this? I mean, game is pretty much going to be the next Overwatch. We're talking about billions and billions of in-game revenue, and hello. So in this video, I'm going to do a primer on how to pitch and market your game so that you don't end up doing the worst pitch ever like the one in that opening skit. So let's break down what really went wrong there. And I have 4 core principles that I want you to focus on. So first, you want to do the right pitch for the right audience. It's important to know what kind of pitch you'll be doing, as there are different kind of pitches, from pitching to your team, potential customers, journalists, platform holders, investors, and publishers, even people that don't actually play game that are somehow related to the industry. And that really matters. So first off, you want to know who you are going to be talking to and what their goals are going to be to have that conversation with you. Second, none of the people that I've mentioned are you or even game developers. So a good practice towards pitching outside of your game's comfort zone is to have your friends and family that aren't really related to the game play it and then have them explain the game back to you. This can be extremely helpful in identifying how people perceive your game and how you should be talking about your game for people to actually get it. For instance, for my last game, Brukel, I was all about explaining it as a World War II or a horror game, or even a game about the innocent bystander that you play. It wasn't until I talked to a friend who had played the game that I realized that it's actually about a shared past that people in my generation in my home country all have. We all have grandparents that lived through World War II and that went through something that we've heard stories of, but that we can't really fathom because our lives are just so different from theirs. Understanding that and using that specific language made such a big difference in the game's reception. It even led to the idea of Gaminiscing as a genre about reliving someone's oral history, which was also an idea I got from a friend.
Friendship is a myth.
Next, make sure that you do a confident pitch of your best creative vision. Time is money, so show people the best concept, the best creative vision that you have. They'll ask you questions or other options if they feel that's needed. But as long as you have done your research, so you know who you're talking to, you know what their goals are, well, then you should just focus on showing them what you think is the best version of your game. Or to refer back to the opening skit when I was talking about, I guess Postulon's a little bit unwieldy. Is it because of the name? Is it because of the name? Because we can change the name. Don't second guess your creative decisions. In fact, a good way to avoid doing so is to always make sure that your creative choices are very much substantiated and have good reasons behind them. For instance, you don't want to eliminate rocket jumping from your fast-paced shooter because it wouldn't work in the real world, in the same way that you don't want to include rocket jumping in a military simulation game. Make sure you remember why you designed the game in a certain way when people ask you though. Next, you want to focus on what matters, and this is a two-parter as it applies to both how you talk about your game and how you're going to show it off. With regards to the game design, your pitch is not about your lore. It's not even about your standard features. So forget about the Guzzlefleber from the intro or that inventory system. It's not what makes that game stand out. And if that's the case, it shouldn't be part of the pitch. Actually, Brian Upton gave some excellent advice on this in a GDC talk. If you want to set up your game and you really need to do so, take the Star Wars approach. Just a few words on screen and bam, we're shooting people with lasers. So keep your setup minimal, don't go into any distracting details that apply to every game in the genre, and get to where your game really stands out. In the end, what matters here is having a strong, marketable hook. It's nice that your game has interesting features, but why will someone buy your game instead of something else on the market? That is really a critical component of pitching your game. Because in the end, it's always about convincing someone that your game is really worth their time and their money. Whether it's a customer or a publisher, doesn't really matter. And that brings me to your supporting materials, as words alone are obviously not gonna cut it. For art that you want to bring, you want it to communicate why your game will stand out and why people will want to play it. So don't bring bad art. It's better to have one or two really good pieces of art instead of a bunch of bad ones. Similarly, make sure that it's very clear what is final and what is not final when it comes to your art or your game as a whole. For instance, while Brukel looked like this at the time when I started pitching it to people, this is what my key visual looked like. It communicates a story about present and past. It even has this ghostly image in the window, and it puts the house and its interesting facade on the foreground. Now, oftentimes art alone will not really cut it, especially when you're looking for publishers. So you typically want to bring a prototype. And again, the key there is to focus on what matters. So bring a prototype that shows that you can execute what you are pitching. It needs to be focused on the unique and hard parts of your game, not on whatever you can just throw together quickly. It's about risk mitigation and demonstrating that you can complete this project. So show that you can do that and that you understand what the challenges of the project are. Similarly, don't spend a lot of time on the things that don't really matter, because that is a huge red flag. And publishers, they don't wear pink glasses.
You know, it's funny. When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags.
For instance, Night in the Woods is all about narrative, and there is a lot of text in that game. So for the prototype, The team made a 30-minute short story in the game's world that showed how they would specifically tackle that issue of the enormous amount of text in an engaging way. Similarly, Overland is an amazing 3D indie game, but their original prototype is a simple 2D grid-based game that could have been made in GameMaker Studio. And while it's not really the same game, it's a great prototype and it was very fun to play. And more importantly, it showed that the team had its game mechanics down and they knew how to make that game tick. And then finally, be ready for the business part of your pitch. Now, this obviously doesn't always apply. It doesn't apply when you're pitching to customers and journalists. But if you are pitching to a business, make sure that you have a clear plan of what the costs are going to be to develop your game. What are the resources, the people, and the amount of time you need? You want to know exactly how big your game is going to be and what that's going to cost. And as for your development team, ideally you already have your leads on board. But if you do not have everybody ready, you want to have a hiring plan for them. Next, have a timeline for your game's production and everything that comes with that. So know when you can have your vertical slice ready. Make sure that if you need any licenses that you have acquired them prior to the pitch. Make sure to have an estimate for when you are planning to ship, on which platforms you are going to ship and who your porting partners are going to be. Know really well who your audience is going to be and know how similar games in the genre did. And actually, speaking of sales projections, don't go for the biggest names in the business. Most indie games don't sell more than 5,000 copies, and ideally you want to shoot for a well-developed, fun-to-play indie title to get in the 30,000 range with good marketing. Yes, certainly there are games that do 500,000 and even much more than that, but you are going to need a very convincing pitch or a lot of credentials and a very experienced team in place to make anyone in the industry believe that your game is the next one that does that. This game is pretty much going to be the next Overwatch. We're talking about billions and billions of in-game revenue. And then finally, number 4.
Hey man, Will Wheaton says, don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick. Be a nice person. Don't trash other companies, people, or don't come across as a douche. Be nice, be enthusiastic, be honest, be respectful of the people you're pitching to. If you can't last 10 to 30 minutes without doing that, why would anyone fund you? But anyways, those are my notes on pitching the game. And remember, with the exception of the business part, they're not just about pitching your game to a publisher for money. These points are also about pitching it to journalists, to customers, which is really where we get into the domain of game marketing, and I have some advice about that as well. In fact, here are another 4 tips regarding marketing.
There's more!
So first, it's important to understand that marketing starts from day one of your development. As a game design student in particular, it can be really easy to lose track of that because most of my students are very much occupied with making sure that they are making a good game rather than making a game that they can actually live off. And I certainly was like that myself when I was in college. However, if you want to make a game that generates the revenue you need to live, you need to think about your marketing early, as marketing takes time. And unless you're paying someone to do your marketing for you, it's going to be a good amount of your time and you're going to need a plan for it as well. So if you want numbers, I would say about 30% of your time even. Next, my second tip is probably the most obvious one that I'm going to talk about in this video, but since this is a primer, I feel like I should mention it regardless. So, marketing your game is all about building up a community of people that are interested in your game. A lot has been written on how to get there, and there are certainly a lot of options to accomplish that, but the goal really is to just create that community around your game so that by the time of launch, you can start sending out messages to your network, journalist connections, social media, and mailing lists so that your community will start talking about it. After all, we all find our projects through algorithms these days, and the way to get to the front page of anything is by having enough people talk about it. Indie game marketing specialist David Whaley talks about this in his GDC talk about a game that he made as a solo developer, and for his launch day, he had a group of about 5,000 people on his mailing list and about twice that amount as Steam wish lists. I really recommend checking out his talk, but before you do, let me get to the third point here. You need to research game marketing consistently, as it changes a lot. While the basic principles stay the same, you want to build up a community and you want to focus on what matters for your audience in your sales pitch or your marketing pitch in this case, the platforms and the channels on which you do that, they tend to change a lot. And to make matters worse, all these platforms have their own little best practices and rules, and marketing your game is different depending on where you're doing it. Say, Twitter does not work the same way as Reddit does when it comes to game marketing. For instance, Reddit very much likes content that feels authentic and personal. At this point, I feel it's kind of overdone a bit as the industry took notice and everybody's doing it now. But you can still get a lot of upvotes with posts such as, I made my first game, and, or look at this funny blunder that happened during developing. Another example is the timing of making your social media posts. There are peak hours when posts get upvoted far more often. So figure out when it's a good time to post and then post at that time. And actually, this is a bit of a tangent, but this also applies to online stores. Don't launch a game when a bigger competitor is also launching theirs. Anyways, while some of that is timeless and a funny video can get traction anywhere, people tend to get immune to it if it's done too often. Some strategies resonate better on certain platforms, and new platforms require new strategies. So do your research on what works and what doesn't work. And then finally, my fourth tip is to learn to communicate your game effectively. It's not just a matter of posting a screenshot to hashtag Screenshot Saturday or even a GIF or a video. There is a lot of theory to how you want to design your key marketing assets. However, I think that would be a video in its own right, so I'm just barely going to touch the surface here. Typically, it comes down to having attractive imagery that conveys why your game is worth playing in 3-5 seconds, something like that. Now that's easier said than done, of course, but that's what it comes down to. In just a few seconds, you want your audience to have a solid idea of who you will be as a player, what actions you can perform in the game, what the atmosphere will be like, and so on. So with that in mind, I think the trailer for Hollow Knight is a good example. Let's watch the first 15 seconds of that. Yeah, that's how you do it. I mean, the music, enticing. The gameplay is immediately clear. The text, descend in a ruined world, forge your own path, master powers. It communicates the key dynamics really well. I would say this would even work very well without sound. Now, of course, different games require different approaches. You can't just take this and apply it to anything. For instance, my game Brukel is not as typical of a video game, a side-scrolling type of game like Hollow Knight. So I had to try something entirely different. So let's have a look at the first 15 seconds that we did for the Brukel trailer. And actually, let's have a look at the Instagram launch trailer for Brukel. En we noemden de mensen wel.
Nee?
We noemden de mensen wel of toen hij
Oh, die van de Brukel? Ja, dat waren wel. En ze kwamen binnen, hè. Met honderden, hè. Tanks, kanonnen. Alles, hè. Hier, vuur.
That actually started with some live video, and that's important because that is to drive home that Brukel is a game about authenticity. It's a real story after all. Then it shows off the atmosphere in the beginning of the game, after which it goes into some of the in-game photography mechanic, which is a core mechanic, so that's important. And then we get to the ghost soldier because, well, it's a ghostly horror story, and that's also important to know. And because it's an Instagram trailer, and many people on Instagram are watching content without audio on a very small screen, we've put this really big typography that's in your face to communicate how dramatic the dialogue is. In fact, if you look at the Steam trailer in contrast, it does none of that at all. It doesn't have that big typography. It's just some subtitles. So anyway, I recommend looking more into screenshot, GIF, and video theory if you want to learn how to create good marketing materials in preparation of your launch. And that'll be it for this video.
Hey,
I'll see.
What about Reggie?
Reggie?
Yeah, wrap up time with Reggie.
Good thing they reminded me, because actually, that's the final bit of advice. I mean, you want to give the people what they want, and the internet's currency today is cute pets. For instance, we had a lot of successful social media posts for Brukel, but one that got really upvoted to the top had a picture of Reggie in it. Coincidence? We think not. Anyways, here are the discussion topics for this week. See you next time. Bye-bye. You think I got a treat here? Let's get you a treat. Who wants to give Reggie a treat? Good boy. Bye-bye.